Right, we're back with some Magnus action. Why? Because you love watching Magnus. I love watching Magnus. We all love watching Magnus. He's the best player in the world. The number one. His games are masterclasses. But sometimes his opponents flip the script, and his opponent today in the European Club Cup is no slouch. He's a guy called Alexey Sarana. This is the flag of Serbia, in case you hadn't seen that one before. 2682, so a strong player. Magnus with white, and already he goes a bit off-piste with the opening. He plays bishop c4 here. Now it looks perfectly respectable, but often that bishop's going to b5, or white's going d4, or playing a closed structure. Don't know why we don't see more of this, to be fair. Looks good. So the pawn is attacked. Knight c3 defends. e6. Is this a reason why? Are you running into a d5 soon? Well, Magnus strikes first. The pawn captures, and now he takes with the queen. More kind of strange sort of opening moves, because now you're running to knight c6 with tempo. The queen drops to d3, not blocking the way of this one to develop. We get a6, bishop f4, and now black does something which you're told not to do, which is move the same piece twice in the opening. You know, why not just develop a bishop or something? But this is a good move, knight g4, because it immediately starts to fight for this e5 square with a knight, try and take advantage of that slightly clumsy setup of bishop and queen on these light squares. So Magnus goes rook d1. Doesn't chase the knight into e5, but now pawn h3 is a big threat because of all this pressure down here on the queen. You wouldn't want to hop to e5, you'd end up losing your pawn basically. So queen b6 played, comes away from that d-file pressure and pressures 2 points. No h3 now, or you're getting checkmated in one. So castles is possible, but I love this from Magnus. Second top engine move. You see the evaluation bar on the left react. The computer doesn't like this as much, but Magnus's idea is way more interesting. So we get bishop e7 played. Just to mention, why wasn't the pawn captured? Well, it's a bit poisoned. The queen doesn't get trapped, but it's way offside. Got to spend time coming back into the game. This one's weak. The king's in the center. It's not good. So instead, bishop e7. Now we see bishop b3 anyway, and the knight hops to e5. So good remaneuver, and I love this from Magnus. He doesn't take here, which was playable. He plays the top move, pawn to h4. This is why he didn't castle. He's really using both sides of the board, you know, using the board as his canvas, as Daniel Naroditsky would say. Now, why doesn't black take here? Well, it is playable, but after pawn recaptures, these double pawns aren't actually that much of a big deal, and there's some play on the king side here. You know, you've opened the g-file, the pawn might be running. Okay, not such a big deal for white, and white could even start attacking. So we see queen c7 instead, preparing to push b5, a counterplay move, and now Magnus goes bishop g5, looking to exchange these ones, soften up the d6 pawn. Now you can go f6, the bishop would have to drop back, the game goes on, just a different game. But black decides not, goes pawn b5, Magnus takes, the king recaptures, and he builds a decent advantage here because of the pressure on this pawn. So check. This one attacked. The king covers. Now we see rook h3. This was one of the other points of pawn to h4. No more double pawns now if you take there. So black kicks the queen. It drops all the way back to d2, pressuring here. And it begs the question, why didn't Alexey Sarana here play king e7, cover the pawn? And there's no obvious answer other than white definitely has a preferred position. You know, the king's stuck in the center. You can go rook g3 immediately, start pressuring this pawn. There's ideas of a4 to start opening things up. Who knows if there's going to be some sacrifices in the center, trying to get at the black king. So he doesn't go for it. He plays bishop b7, developing but now dropping a clean pawn. But Magnus doesn't take straight away. He first flicks in this knight e5, gets his opponent to burn a few more precious minutes. Now, why not capture with the pawn? Save the pawn. well then queen d7 is a big problem, because not only is there this standoff here, and if you capture the queen the rook invades, but say you go rook c8 to cover that queen, then there's rook f3. Big problems here, you're forcing a capture, the knight shuffles back and it's awful. You can even take here using the pin, and if knight captures, this bishop's dropping. First you do this, obviously it's horrendous for black. So coming back here, pawn takes no good, the knight recaptures, queen takes with check, back one move. Magnus was a bit critical of this. He said maybe he should have gone f4 here, drive back the knight, then take. But okay, he crashes through. Queen takes on d6, rook recaptures, king e7, drives back that rook, and now pawn g5. Black finally gaining some space of their own in the centre. We get a3, Magnus ignoring it, keeping the tension. What about g4? Well, the rook can always find a home, of h5, there's f4, all sorts of things going on. So no g4 played. We see bishop c6, supports this pawn, holds d7 some more, and prepares a5. Now from afar, Magnus had planned knight e2 here, giving a pawn, getting some initiative. But he sort of forgot in the game, he said, went bishop a2, and now pawn a5 comes. And just because I'm telling you what Magnus said about the game, don't assume he won it right. There is still some tension to come in this one. So we get takes on g5, pawn recaptures, the rook takes here, this one takes back, and b4. Magnus doesn't want this knight to get driven away, it's defending e4. We get captures, pawn recaptures, and rook h4. Great move, pressuring the central pawn. f3 defends, so g4 looks to undermine. f4 kicks on past that pawn, like ships in the night, not actually engaging. The knight drops back to g6, and g3 defends and attacks, but this pawn is weak. It's the base of the chain. We see some checks, and now Sarana goes after that pawn. Magnus forced on the defensive here. We get another check, king b2 and rook e1. Great move now coming behind this e-pawn. Magnus pushes it forward, and this is a classy waiting move. King back to e8, preparing knight e7 into f5, where it'll then loom over the ramparts and hit this pawn on g3. So Magnus has to react. He goes knight d1, but now look at the evaluation bar react after bishop e4 hitting Magnus's rook, and after this move of rook d2, we get a swing. What should Magnus have played? Well, here is apparently the top move. This is basically just very, very drawish. Something like this, but it does look a bit better for black. This knight coming here, Magnus is going to have to fight to make the draw with c4 and that kind of thing. But what we see is rook d2, and you'll see the eval bar drop. Black is now a half pawn better. Why is this? Well, the computer wants to take on f4. Now, Magnus had a different move planned in response to this, but if you capture with the pawn, the idea is pawn to g3. And actually, this shouldn't be more than a draw when you start running it deeper, even though at first it says it's great for black, because there's knight c3, pressures this bishop. If you then go pawn g2, well, it's not actually working. Looks like this is going through, or you have to give up your rook, but then there's knight takes here. Yes, you can make the queen, but there's check. The king can come here, but you drive it all the way, check from down here and win it. I mean, it's a crazy line, right? But it's not actually winning if you immediately push the pawn. So what should black do here? Well, the move now is drop back the bishop and hold the threat. Rook e2, the line goes on. Eventually, this rook should have to give itself up. You get an endgame here where black's an exchange up, but white's got an extra pawn. Two extra pawns. Should be a rough level balance, but black had that opportunity to apply pressure with the knight sack. But what was Magnus planning if this was played? He said he was going to go knight f2, cover the g pawn, and after this knight moves away, g6, pick up here, but he's the one grovelling, trying to make the draw. But no knight takes on f4 played. It was missed as an opportunity to put pressure on Magnus. Instead, rook g1, but now knight c3, hitting the bishop, hitting the pawn, and a deadly mistake is made. Bishop c6 should be played. Yes, there's rook d6, but then you defend like this. This is the best way. White can keep applying pressure, but black should be holding. But what we see in the game is bishop f3, and there's a problem because the knight takes here, the rook takes here, but it's in a huge tactical bad spot now. As we're going to see, there's a brilliant breakthrough move. Can you guess how white should play here to explode the position in their favour? So, the move you need to play is pawn to f5. This bishop suddenly becomes a star of the show because if you capture, there's check and you're going to be winning this rook. If you step anywhere to the d file, there's this discovered check, then winning the rook. If you step up to the e file, still check, win the rook. And if you go king f8, then still you jump to f5, winning the rook, because if you try and move it, this is checkmate. The knight takes away the escape squares for the king. So massive problems. You cannot take the pawn. So the knight captures here instead. And now does Magnus take here and smash that to pieces? No. He plays an even stronger move of pawn to f6. The king is getting boxed into a mating net. So knight d7 played. It's a great defensive move. Blocks the d file, attacks the pawn, but now Magnus checks. And here we see a move that does not put up the best resistance. King d8 was best. Yes, this pawn drops. You can run around here. Another pawn will drop. White has two connected passes running on the queen side here. The rook invades, but black has some counterplay opportunities. There's work to be done. But what we see in the game is king to f8, but now knight f5, and it forced resignation. The rook is hit and the knight is hit here. So taking looks very natural, basically forced, but the rook then takes and there's too many problems. The pawn is dropping and one of these is running through. You know, say you try and activate your rook with rook to g2. Well, then you can check, and that's actually mate, sorry, so you can't activate the rook. But what if you start with king e8, then there's check, you win the pawn. Now if you try and activate the rook, well, the bishop just shuts this trap on the king. Once again, you drive it round and the pawn is going through. So Magnus Carlsen does get the job done. His opponent had one small chance, but okay, it's Magnus, right? I hope you enjoyed that one. Do hit like, do hit subscribe, hugely helps me out. And if you want to see another epic game of chess, then check out the video on screen. Thanks very much for watching and see you soon.